Hello everybody, my name is Nicole Humphreys and I am Head of Employment Law with Acumen Business Law. Acumen Business Law are a business law firm specialist. We deal with all your business needs. If you need shareholders agreement, if you need terms and conditions, if you've got property issues, commercial property, intellectual property, we cover all of that. I, as I said, work in the Employment Law Department and dispute resolution. The two often go hand in hand. That's not to say that there are some nice things about employment law. It's great when people come to you and say, I'm just about to get my first new employee and we need, I need some guidance, I need some contracts, and I need some support. But invariably, I get involved when there's a dispute, when things have gone wrong, when there are issues and when there are grievances. So that's what I do. And obviously, as the dispute resolution side, I do company commercial disputes, but also that ties in with employment law as well. An example of something that I've seen, I was going to draw an example of a client that I worked with quite recently. Now, I work with this client quite closely, but it's important to say that they don't have many employment law issues, and I think that's because of the way they deal with their employees and their staff, and I think that sort of resonates through their culture and particularly their well-being. But they had experience with some staff members of a miscarriage, and I think it might have been a neonatal loss rather than a miscarriage. And they came to me and they said that they wanted to build their policies, because although we have the statutory maternity leaves and we have the new parental bereavement leaves in place, there's nothing statutory for something like a miscarriage. And they said that it was very traumatic for this particular person, not just her, but also the partner as well. And they wanted to put in policies in place. And they weren't just policies of what you get from a statutory provision. It was policies, we want to give them more than the statutory provisions. We want them to know that they can access counselling. We want them to know that they can take as much time as they need. And then if they need more time, they can take that extra time. And as I said, that really resonates throughout their whole culture, because they're constantly thinking about, what is good for their staff. Not just what they have to do, but what they can do sort of above and beyond. And she said to me, I hope that this never happens again, but if it does, we looked at all of their family-friendly policies, and we sort of, they all work now together. And she said, if this ever happens in the past, I think they're quite a female-led organisation, if it happens, in the future, that they're really geared up to this, and people know that they can go and they can get that support. So that was a really, really good example of sort of dealing with well-being from a very specific one.
Thank you. So you happy to pass the mic along? Lovely.
Yeah. Morning everyone, I'm Dee Matheson, Managing Director of Electa. Electa are a healthcare company. We design, manufacture, sell and market radiation therapy equipment for cancer, for cancer care. Our mission is all about hope for everyone dealing with cancer, and offering the best treatment, the best technology to anyone in the world, irrespective of where you are. So well-being is very close to our hearts. We're some 4,500 people globally, and there's about 900 in the UK. When I took this job, we'd just come off the back of COVID, so that was comedy timing, as you spoke. No. So yeah, it was a point at which we already had a wellbeing programme, and my HR colleagues, two of them are here with us today. And I think it was something we ran very much around the sort of physical health and well-being. And post-COVID, one of the things obviously that we all understand very well is the impact on mental health. We're concerned about the health crisis of our young people and the mental health that they go through. But I think also with an organisation like Electa, we sell to hospitals. So our customers obviously needed budget to buy the equipment. We had supply chain issues. We had to keep the factory going in Crawley. So a number of us were in there periodically, but it was a bit of a wasteland. So a bit of a tumbleweed moment for me taking the job. I'm a people person, and daily I was going into this big old empty building and seeing people in the factory, which was nice. I got to know them very well because there weren't many of us there, which was lovely. But I realised as people were coming back that the mental health aspects, the impact of being isolated on some was dreadful. Some of them we had to write special letters for so that they could come into work because they couldn't cope at home, they didn't have the right environment. It really affected their mental health and well-being. So I think what we learned from that, we've injected back into our programme, and we now have a wonderful wellbeing agenda. It's top of mind as a healthcare company anyway, but I think particularly in the UK with HR, the corporate social responsibility agenda, we hired somebody who was head of CSR at Roche, Tanya, who asked the first brilliant question, apparently, well done, extra spend. But you know, we've really taken it seriously and we've injected it back into the workforce. So it's not just about signposting well-being for individuals. I mean, let's face it, our businesses are our people. If our people aren't healthy, if they aren't efficient, our business isn't healthy and we don't make the numbers. So there is a straight line to the business results, and that's the way in which I managed to justify extra spend into the CSR programme and the HR activities. And I think it's just fundamental, and we're always learning. It's one of the reasons I brought 4 people along with me today. We want to learn from you, we want to do it better, because it's so important, and I think it's a paramount topic. So thank you for inviting us here today. And I've got a bit of a depressing topic to talk about on my table, which you'll hear more about later, about the cancer crisis in the UK. But cancer, after all, is about well-being. So thank you very much.
Wow, how do I follow that after Dee held the fort so admirably? So hello everyone, I'm Dr. Charlotte Ray from the University of Sussex, and I lead the Sussex 4-Day Week project, and we help employers who want to trial a 4-day working week. From the very earliest stages of even considering it and answering lots of FAQs, through to planning, how are we going to adapt the work to make sure that, of course, the business still operates and hopefully does even better, then moving to implementation and running a trial. And then we do lots of monitoring of staff wellbeing, of staff performance, of objective performance metrics too, and then we do lots of data analytics at the end to give some hard numbers on what the transformation has actually been for the staff and for that employer. So the example of best practice in wellbeing that I would like to give comes from a conversation that I had just yesterday with an HR consultant who told me about a marketing agency who are hybrid. And they were really keen to have their staff coming into the office 2 days a week for those really valuable in-person interactions. But they recognised that on those 2 days, there was a commute that needed to happen that wasn't happening on the other days when those hybrid staff were working from home. And they were worried about the impact that might be having in terms of accessibility, doing the school run, and they were also worried about the impact it might be having on staff in terms of feeling tired, motivation, and perhaps just not leaning into that day of meetings because of having to tack on the commute before and after the full working day. So the simple but I think really innovative and effective adaptation they made was they just shortened the working day ever so slightly so that staff started at 9:45 in the morning and left at 4:15 p.m. in the afternoon. That enabled people to do the school run. It meant that the commute wasn't tacked on to that longer working day. And so in doing that, they were able to really take care of staff wellbeing, but at the same time meet their business objective, which was to bring people into the office and have them engaged when they were in the office and not stressed, not tired. So in this one adaptation, I thought that was quite an effective approach and one that I hadn't seen before. And you'll hear from me a bit later about how other forms of cropping how much time people spend at work can sometimes give big dividends for both wellbeing and performance. Thank you.
Good morning, my name's Anna Galowski from Stratus Coaching. My organisation is set up to provide coaching and training services to organisations to help them create mentally healthy workplace cultures. And I set up the business partly based on my own experience of having absolute burnout and stress. My manager at the time was not only unhelpful and unsupportive, but I think she actually exacerbated the problem, which resulted in me having to take several months off work. 3 weeks of that was spent in the Priory Hospital to recover. So I set up my organisation to help people avoid problems like that, because I really believe that we're employed for our brains, and in order to get the best out of our brains, to make good decisions, to be productive, efficient, effective, get on well with our colleagues and enjoy work, we need to know how they work. So I've studied a lot of neuroscience about how our brains work, particularly when it comes to managing pressure and stress, looking at what happens in our brains when we're feeling stressed versus when we're feeling under pressure, which is healthy. I also do a lot of work around resilience and mental toughness, so using sports psychology methodologies. So very interested to hear what Sally said. And we look at what we can take from the research in the sports world and look at how we can apply it in the business world, in organisations. So if you want to find out more, please join me at my table at the back there.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Camille and I am the founder of the Float Spa. So we are only 5 minutes down the road, down the seafront, and we are a multi-award-winning health and wellness centre. All our therapies are aimed at improving your mental and your physical well-being, and we have a range of services from floating to massage, coaching, acupuncture, and we have 30 yoga classes a week. One of our big specialities is helping people understand how to take workplace wellbeing seriously, and it's something I've been banging the drum on since 2018. So one of the benefits of COVID was the fact that more people are now looking to support their employees at work. One of my fascinations, and I've done lots of training, is helping people, especially men, and it's great to see so many men in the room, but helping men to understand that women are not small men and that our hormones are different. And actually our decision making is related to our hormones. So we might make better decisions at certain times of the month. We might make poorer decisions at certain times of the month. We have more energy at certain times. We have less energy, and we are quite different. So I'm working with employers now to help them understand the female hormone cycle, and the output and result is unbelievable. Helping men and women understand, mainly from teenage to reproductive years. I don't specialise in menopause, that's not my area, and there's plenty of people now that support that. But working with clients to fully understand how to get the best out of women as employees and as employers has been a real eye-opener for me, and the results have been epic. So yes, that's fine.
Fantastic. Right, we're going to run on one mic, so I'm just going to run this down to Donna, who's going to pass it back to Dee.
So my question is to Dee. So we see the impact of cancer and often complex and long-term conditions on children, and it affects their whole family, and it affects them for years in some cases. With 50% of people getting cancer now, what do you think is kind of lacking in that space that would make the most impact on people's well-being?
Thank you. I mean, one of the major things would be acknowledgement that the funding for typical treatments isn't where it should be. Half of those people that get cancer will require radiation therapy. And at the moment, the government are only spending 5% of the cancer budget on radiation therapy. So when it comes to children, obviously radiation therapy isn't the standard of choice. Typically it'd be immunotherapy, chemotherapy and so on, but certainly for the broader population where it is of higher incidence. When we say 1 in 2 people will get cancer, it generally is of the older population. So several things that are magic, if you like, within the care pathway, but do require investment, one of which is diagnosis, earlier diagnosis, and I think we've made good provision for that in the UK. But before I embark on this tirade or soapbox, it's also worth noting that if you look at well-developed countries in Europe, we are 28th, near the bottom of a league table of 33 countries. Many of those countries above us have less money to spend than we do. So we're not asking a massive ask, and Electa, being a radiation therapy cancer care company, obviously see this as very high on our agenda to address. So diagnosis is really important, but the first thing you want to know when you've been diagnosed, and they have made efforts to improve this, there are mobile units, there are more screening. You want to know, how do I get better? How do I get rid of this thing? So what the government did post-COVID was brag about a 62-day waiting time. Just know that every 4 weeks, your cancer doesn't stop, it doesn't wait. And every 4 weeks that you're delayed to get to treatment, irrespective of where it is in your care pathway, reduces your chance of survival by 10%. These are sobering numbers.
So what we want to do is not frighten everybody, but we want to make people aware that that diagnosis to treatment is the critical success factor really of what happens next. And I think we could reduce stress on the mental well-being of patients and their families and their loved ones by improving that alone. The next thing is, if you get referred for radiation therapy in this country, it's a postcode lottery. It really depends on where you live. There are 3.5 million people who live more than 45 minutes away from their nearest centre. We're very fortunate here in the south. We've got a brand new centre being set up, as you know, which will be well equipped with the latest technologies. But in the UK alone, 200 more treatment systems, as we make and other manufacturers make, I'm not here to sell Electa, but 200 more systems are needed in the UK over the next 5 years to address what is becoming a crisis. We don't have enough machines, so even if you do get referred, and assuming you are lucky enough to only wait 62 days, because the other thing of note is 1 in 4 people meet the 62 days, the other 3 do not. And if you watch the media, you may have seen on the news, because we're part of many lobbying organisations, but it was World Cancer Day a couple of weeks ago, and there were people with a banner, patients and their families, holding up a banner that said 200,000 people missed that wait time last year in England. I mean, these are just appalling numbers. So Electa, we're all about hope. This is what we want to do. And I think if you give people hope, you can immediately, as long as you follow through, you can improve mentally how they're going to cope with what is really quite a challenging thing for the entire family. It's not just the patient themselves, as you well know. So Electa Lobby, there are many lobbying organisations. So if you want to know, please link up with me on LinkedIn. You'll get blasted with stuff, but it's an opportunity for you to repost and to help us lobby, be another voice to support cancer in the UK, because it's something that's only going to get worse. And that 62 days, by the way, that only covers new diagnoses, not these several 100,000 people that got misdiagnosed or got missed during COVID. So underneath that, there's a whole slew of patients who are late to present and have a less of a chance of cure than the others. So long answer to your question, but there's a lot more that we in this room can do as well to lend your voice to that lobbying. It's really important. Thank you.
Thank you. My turn now to come down to Aon.
Thank you. Thank you, Dee. Sobering numbers there. Really appreciate that. So my question is to Charlotte. As people who work in the flexible working space at all times, we understand that there are huge benefits to not only flexible working, but the work that you've done in the 4-day week. Can you elaborate on the scientific evidence? Because I know that you put people through neuroscience to measure how the benefits and the beauty of the 4-day week actually make you healthier and happier.
Fab, thanks Emma. So first, what do we mean by the 4-day week? It's a handy catchphrase, and lots of people assume that means, oh, we're closed on Fridays. But I think first it's probably worth clarifying, actually there's no one size fits all, there's no standard model. So some businesses do indeed close on a Friday, but some pick a different day. Some dovetail, so one person's off on a Monday, another person's off on a Tuesday. Other flavours of this are a 9-day fortnight or 5 shorter days. But what all those scenarios have in common is an overall reduction in the number of hours that staff are spending at work across the working week with no loss of salary, and bringing flexible working in can absolutely align with that too. One can work those hours flexibly according to employees and business designs. So as Emma said, we've been studying in great detail the changes that take place for individual staff in terms of well-being, also in terms of performance at work, and also for employers too in terms of outcomes like retention, revenue, and objective performance metrics. And if you're interested to hear some of the more detailed findings from all the studies that we've been doing, then do come and join us on the table here. But just to give you a few snippets and highlights here, in terms of staff wellbeing, we have seen scientifically, statistically significant improvements in reduced burnout, in improved mood and better sleep. And when it comes to workplace performance, we've seen statistically significant improvements in better productivity, in higher work engagement. That's how enthusiastic and motivated you feel about your work, and also an increased retention. So I'd like to finish with just sharing one highlight finding from our study that I'm really excited about. And I'm very sorry, I bought a graph. So I'm just going to stand up so that the people at the back can see this a little bit better. But what this graph shows you is that the more someone's sleep improved when they switched to the 4-day working week, the more their productivity went up. On the other hand, we got a very interesting second finding, which is that the more someone's mood improved, the more their work engagement went up. So the more enthusiastically motivated they felt about work. And very interestingly, there was no association between mood and productivity, and there was no association between sleep and work engagement. And I'm so excited about these findings because it tells us 3 really important things. The first is that well-being is inextricably, very closely linked to performance at work. I think everyone here in the room intuitively gets that, right? But here's the hard scientific evidence to back that up. The second interesting things that these findings tell us are that different facets of well-being map onto different facets and different dimensions of workplace performance. And so if you can improve sleep, fantastic, because you'll probably get a boost to productivity, but you might not get accompanying boost to other aspects of what's going on in the workplace. So that tells us, thirdly, that if you want to improve multiple dimensions of workplace performance and experience, you need to improve multiple dimensions of health and well-being, and that goes for physical and mental health. And just hitting one of those well-being dimensions won't necessarily give you the well-rounded knock-on benefits to performance. And what we've seen with the 4-day week or other implementations of it, like a 9-day fortnight, like the shortened working day that I mentioned earlier, in one fell swoop, you can simultaneously improve these multiple dimensions of well-being, mental health, burnout, sleep, and through that then leads to multiple gains in one fell swoop on performance too. So that's why I think it's really gaining traction, and there's lots of interest in this as a new style, a new way of working, of redesigning the working week, because of those kind of holistic benefits that you can achieve.
Well, there's a challenge for everyone. Everyone's going to be signed up to the 4-day week by the end of the day, I suspect, Charlotte. Thank you. The neuroscience really does play out that the benefits are there, but as you so rightly point out, it's got to be a holistic approach to from each business to each employee. So thank you for that. Anna, we're coming to you next, and we wanted to talk about stress, burnout, anxiety in the workplace. Since COVID, that seems to be, according to the CIPD, people are healthier in themselves physically, but actually mentally less healthy. And I wonder if you can tell us, because everyone in the room will have had stress at some point, maybe come close to burnout at some point. What are some techniques that we can employ or that you've seen that really benefit people in the workplace?
So, as you said, stress, anxiety and depression has overtaken things such as back problems and musculoskeletal problems in terms of sickness days. It's a huge cost to organisations in terms of lost productivity, sickness, attrition, and recent research has put the figure for UK organisations at 56 billion per year. So that's £1 billion per week we're losing in terms of lost productivity due to mental ill health. And in NHS, doctors, prescriptions, counselling, that figure rises over to 120 billion. My philosophy around this is that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. So what organisations need to do is to be really proactive when it comes to dealing with stress and pressure in the workplace. Pressure is actually something which is really healthy in the right amount of doses. It gives us that clarity, the goal, the direction, that sense of purpose, and we know what's expected of us. What we need to be very mindful of is where people start to tip over, where they're working excessively long hours, they've got a poor manager who isn't very supportive, as was my case, toxic relationship with colleagues, lack of clarity and lots of uncertainty going around. What we want you to do is to encourage people to think about their well-being as a priority and not as a luxury when their day job has been done. So what can we do to incorporate things in the workplace? Will be looking at policies in terms of flexibility, in terms of the resources that we've got, but also ensuring that people are properly trained and adequately trained. I can't believe that mental health and wellbeing isn't a mandatory training for people managers to go through. I think it should be absolutely vital, so that we can spot those early warning signs way before people get to the point where they're struggling and having to take time off work. It's really encouraging people to take their breaks, to take their lunch breaks, looking at the working hours that they've got, looking at the sort of the resources that they've got, and not just thinking that a little token gesture of a bowl of fruit in the reception desk is going to cut it. That isn't going to do anything. And as a client said to me, they can stick the fruit where the sun doesn't shine, because until they've sorted out, their well-being and the sort of the policies and the training, it's not going to take effect. So organisations need to be really strategic about this. They need to look at what employee assistance programs they can do. They need to look at their sort of their policies. And that covers things such as diversity and inclusion. They need to ensure that any team leaders and managers are adequately trained, not only to spot those early warning signs, but how to confidently have the conversations, because so many people say to me that they can tell someone isn't quite themselves, they're not quite performing right, that even though they've not said anything, there's a bit of a vibe, but they just don't know what to say and how to say it, so they ignore them. And I think it's just really thinking about mental health in the same way that we think about our dental health. We don't wait until we've got toothache to start cleaning our teeth. We clean our teeth by habit every single day to hopefully prevent problems. Think about the same for your mental health. So think about, the exercise. Doesn't have to be extremely vigorous and 400-metre hurdles, Pilates, yoga, gentle walk. Join me for a sea swim down here in Brighton. I have to crowbar the fact that I go sea swimming into every conversation. But rest and relaxation, athletes, they value their rest days as much as they do their training days. So think about the boundaries, taking time out for whatever you do to enjoy nutrition and water. It's not rocket science, but we tend to forget some of the basic obvious stuff when the pressure and the responsibilities and the demands are building up. So little, often, just make it a regular routine and habit is the key.
Brilliant, thank you. And following on that, over to Nicole. Anna's just talked a little bit about some of the impacts of poor well-being amongst your team. We've got increased sickness and reduced productivity. Can you talk to us a little bit from your experience about what are the pitfalls for employers with poor well-being, and how you can avoid some of those pitfalls?
Thank you. Yeah, obviously people come to me at the point where there's potentially a crisis, and there's employee unrest, and there's grievances. And I often am faced with a conversation like, well, this person's not performing and I want to get rid of them. And I often say, well, what have you done about it? And they say, oh, well, nothing. And actually it turns out they've had a pay rise and a glowing reference and nothing's been talked about. So the overriding objective is always to, not think that something's going on, like you said, and do nothing about it, but to handle it. And the way to do that really is to have your policies in place. So you've got your equality and diversity and your anti-bullying and your sickness policies, but also to know what's in those policies and to understand how to implement those policies. There's no point in having a dusty staff handbook sitting in the corner of the room that nobody's even read. Nobody knows what to do with it and how to do with it, or where to look beyond that sort of dusty old book in the corner for knowing how to manage things. So, for example, if somebody is off sick habitually on a Monday, okay, it could be that they're just playing a game and they're a bit of a party animal at the weekend, but it could be that something else is going on, okay? And so don't make any knee-jerk reactions to a situation. Don't think that somebody's done something drastic and made a huge mistake, that's because they're incompetent or because they're not performing well. It could be that something else is going on with their mental well-being. It could be that there's problems going on at home. as employers, we have a duty to provide reasonable adjustments for anybody that has a disability, and disability in this sense can be physical and mental disability. We have a duty as employers to provide reasonable adjustments. Okay, but it's not just for those people that have a disability. It's for the whole of the work staff. So and as part of that duty, you are either on notice that something's going on, but what people don't understand is that you may also ought to be on notice. So if somebody is off sick on a regular basis and you don't sit down with them and you don't say to them, okay, what's going on? Let's talk about it. Is there anything you need to talk about? Then you are failing in that duty to that person. And actually, if you ought to know that there's something going on with somebody because they're off sick all the time, and you haven't asked those questions, then actually you're failing in that duty, and that could give rise to a risk. Similarly, don't make knee-jerk reactions about something. Somebody does something awful and drastic, don't suspend them without first understanding, perhaps that there's something else going on underlying that. Because then you can talk about those problems, and you can probably come to a swift resolution, which is obviously something that is important. Now, I referred to earlier a company that don't come to us very often with employment issues, and that's because they're very engaged in their staff well-being, and they talk to their staff regularly. And it really does follow that if your staff are happy and engaged and well motivated and supported and they have a good life balance, that if there is something going on with them and they need to talk about that, then they are more likely to come to you anyway, and you can avoid all these problems. So having a well engaged and a good well-being and life balanced environment for work will prevent those problems coming up in the first place, because that person will say, do you know what, actually I'm having a few problems and I need to talk about it, rather than you hitting crisis point and not really understanding how to deal with it. And then of course your managers need to know how to deal with it as well. You need to have people that are good at talking to people and don't dismiss something which could be an issue. Don't dismiss a woman that's having menopausal problems, for example, just because you don't understand it. And if you don't understand it, then it's up to you as businesses to make sure that your staff and your managers do understand what's going on. So, yes, I think that would be talk about it a lot.
Brilliant, thank you. My final question is to Camille. Looking at wellbeing activities, again, something we deliver lots of in the Children's Hospital. What's your take on how people can use alternative and additional therapies and treatments to really promote the best wellbeing in themselves and their teams? And I'm going to bring down the microphone and ask you.
Yes, thank you. So obviously wellbeing covers a massive broad spectrum, and yes, the alternative therapies or those therapies that complement NHS's work, I think is a really nice way of putting it. So if I just go for a very quick flashback to 2014, I used to work in a very, very high pressured, high stress, toxic environment, and I'd worked in the company for 3.5 years. And the reason I'm so passionate about Rockinghorse, because in 2014, my daughter nearly died. She spent a lot of time in the Royal Alex, supported by Rockinghorse, and she was blue lighted to intensive care, and then we were supported back afterwards. So it's something that's hugely passionate for me. And then as a direct result, my daughter's fine. She's 10 now and gobby as hell. She's absolutely fine, but it was actually my mental health that spiralled, and I'd been an overachiever. I'd always worked 1,000 miles an hour and just saw having a child as like an addition to the life that I was, and never really took stock. And when you are on this roller coaster, you don't really notice how bad things get until the roller coaster falls down or breaks. And I spiralled into a very dark place, a little bit like yourself, and I was diagnosed with PTSD, anxiety and depression, and I was as far down rock bottom as you can get, and just about came out the other side. And actually it was my dad that recommended flotation therapy, and my initial reaction was, I don't have 5 minutes to myself, yet alone 1 hour, what are you talking about? the most complimentary, alternative, wild thing I'd ever done was have a massage on holiday in Turkey. So this was quite far removed from my life. So I don't listen to many people, my husband, my dad. And so I listened to him and I went and had a float and absolutely hated the first experience. I thought, what a waste of my time. My mind can't settle. I came out with a headache. I felt awful. I was like, this is not for me. And he said, can you just go back to somewhere else? The place that I went to first time was filthy and everything was wrong with it that could be. And I went somewhere else. And then I went back a couple of days later, and during my third float, I was like, do you know what? Some things kind of settled in my brain. And then I went on a roller coaster, a good one, of looking at all the alternative therapies that there was. And eventually I decided that the environment was toxic. Burnout is not key. I was very unsupported by my employer, and I was very senior in the company, and the cost to provide me with some support would have been much cheaper than when me leaving, and then the cost to recruit 2 people because I did too much. So my point being on here is there are plenty of therapies out there that could be about prevention. Yes, I've made a point of saying that obviously I didn't know about these things, and actually I used flotation to overcome that. But if we looked at ways to prevent things from bad happening, we would be all in a much better way. And that's what we do. Flotation therapy is not a new age mumbo jumbo. It was designed by a neuroscientist, we like neuroscience on this panel, in 1954. And actually some of the first float tanks commercially hit the market in the 80s. So it's not been around, it has been around for a long time. I will talk to you the hind legs off how amazing flotation therapy is. Yoga is unbelievable. We're doing some laughing yoga in a minute, which is going to be wonderful. And yoga is incredibly good for mental health, whether you're in an acute state or whether you want to prevent things. Looking at coaching, therapies, all of these complement your life and have a massive significant impact. Now, one thing might work for one person, yes, but having that broad spectrum of opportunities and difference are amazing, and that is key to mental and physical improvements in your life.
From the heart, Camille, as ever. Thank you. I think prevention rather than cure seems to be a theme that's going through this, and that communication and transparency at work are really critical, in particularly maybe in corporates. We run a very small business and it's much easier to talk to each other when there's only 6 of you, but when there's 600, 6,000, 60,000 around the world, it's those policies in place are so fundamental to making a business thrive, which is what we're here for, to find some tools and techniques that really promote good business practice before the proverbial hits the fan. So I would like to ask a wrap-up question, and then we've got some time for a few questions afterwards, because I'm sure lots of you've got burning questions. And I know that we've talked about best practice and inspirational leaders and techniques that you can employ, but I wonder if you individually would like to elaborate on what one thing you would like to see change in your specific industry or in your environment that would really make a difference to this world of well-being and making the world of work a better place. Shall we work our way that way?
I don't have huge amounts of time, so I'm going to be very cautious and succinct on this. So for me, I think we all need to take ownership of our own life. And in the environment, you can take ownership of your own staff's well-being. And what I mean by this is you are in control of everything you eat, how you exercise, how you move, how you take breaks. And as a business owner, we are open 7 days a week. My staff only work 4 days, just let you know. So we're open 90 hours a week, and actually encouraging your staff to take breaks. The amount of times I encourage them to go outside and say, go and get some fresh air, even on a rainy day. We're based in the basement, so we wouldn't get natural light otherwise. But actually taking ownership of those things that are important, taking regular breaks, consciously considering the food that you have in the environment. The amount of businesses I've walked into and I've been offered a bowl of sweets and the abundance of coffee, and you're like, come on. So there's lots of things that you can do if you take ownership of the environment. So instead of just passing it on to another person in the team, what can you do? What ideas can you bring forward? And taking responsibility of your small part of the piece and the puzzle will give you a much more harmonious environment in which to work in.
Without a doubt, it's management and leadership training on this topic. Being able to spot the signs, being able to start those conversations proactively and nip things in the bud is absolutely essential, because leaders and managers have the biggest impact on people's mental health, because we spend so much time in organisations and in the workplace at the moment, but also communicating what you've got. So many organisations have fantastic employee provisions in terms of counselling, in terms of benefit, gym memberships, all of this kind of stuff, but hardly anyone knows what's available or what the referral pathway is. So please do communicate, over-communicate what you've got available, so that when people need to access it, it's there to hand. Otherwise, it's like having a billboard in the desert and it's a wasted resource.
So one change that I would like to see is if we can look at rolling out access to a 4-day week, or one of its many variants, even if it's just cropping the working day by 45 minutes, to a more diverse array of organisations. Because really at the moment it's being led by proactive SMEs in the private sector who think, yep, this is a good thing for my business, so we're just going to go ahead and do it. But if we think about particular groups of employees that we know are really struggling with well-being, maybe Rockinghorse's colleagues in the NHS, how can we move beyond the private sector to some of those wider groups of employees? And for this, I think there's going to need to be collaboration, say with trade unions, with policymakers, so it's very much, I think, a long-term aspiration. But in the short term, one change that I'd like to see is more of those private sector SMEs doing a 4-day week trial or some other variant of it, because through that we're going to continue to really build that evidence base, get more data points on that graph, and continue to develop our insights into how working practices can be reshaped for the benefit of the business as well as the staff. So I think that's more a shorter term aspiration.
Thank you. I mean, I agree with the comment about it has to start from the top effectively. In a larger organisation, one of the things I'd like to see change is some authenticity from the wider leadership within the corporation. I think, walking the talk, removing the stigma of mental health issues. Wouldn't it be great if we could provide a completely safe workspace where people felt they could talk about it? We have to almost provide places for people to go and do that. We've heard already the impact that mental health is having on our results and the sickness levels in the UK. So I'd really like to see an acknowledgement of that more broadly across all companies, not just our own, but also authenticity when we're talking about it. You can tell when people are paying lip service. Nobody in this room would do that, of course, because we're all here, because we're passionate about it, and you're all got lots of experience that, we want to be a learning organisation, we want to be able to do more. But I think one of the things I really see as a block, if you like, or a barrier to really reaching that next level isn't around physical health. I think, we've done an awful lot of work there now. It's around the mental health and well-being. We invited in somebody who did mindfulness, and I think that taught us different ways of considering. And it's really interesting to hear about the floating spa and my colleagues on the panel of other ways of considering how you can be proactive about helping people recover from stress. Sally talked about turning stress and a bad experience into resilience. I think if there's one big word I've learned since I took this job, it's resilience, whether it's business resilience, people resilience. Learn from it, see it as a win. When you come back from it, celebrate it. See it as a win, no matter how small it is, in your personal life or work, and build your confidence so that the next time something crappy happens, you're more resilient. And I think that applies to everyone.
Wouldn't it be lovely if everybody that had to manage people had to do some compulsory management training? I don't think that's going to happen. That would be on my wish list. But I'm very, very fortunate to work at Acumen Business Law. I was the first person to join Acumen. When I joined, I had 2 very small children. They're now big and still causing me lots of problems. I work a 4-day week on a part-time basis and have done, and that's been supported throughout. As I said, I'm very lucky with Acumen because I have a leader who trained herself. She has a whole row of books and is constantly looking at ways to improve, to nurture, to support. She's always having those conversations with us. We recently went out and had a barn day, which was a fantastic day. It wasn't a strategy day at all. It was a day about sort of reconnecting to each other, getting back together, getting outside. We went for a big walk, got extremely muddy. Fed some horses, had a great time. It was freezing cold, but we all huddled around the campfire at the end of the day. We did a bit of sort of support work for each other, and then we all sat round and we talked about. We were invited to sort of talk about an issue or something which is important to us, and it really was quite eye-opening because it was allowing people to express their emotions. Some people were talking about dead parents, some people were talking about bereavement, some people were talking about loss, some people were talking about mental health, and it was really a fantastic opportunity to understand that that person standing up there was able to communicate that with all of us. And that came from our leadership and our fantastic sort of inspirational leadership team that we have, which just is always focused on well-being. We have a team meeting, we're very team driven. We have a team meeting every week where we all put forward our own ideas. And actually a lot of that is about well-being and how we can make things better in the workplace and how we can make it, the atmosphere and the environment a nice welcoming place. And I would like to see all managers doing a bit of reading. When you put somebody in to manage people in a role, that's daunting for that person if they've never done it. So, ask them if they need some training, ask them if they need some equality and diversity training, ask them if they need some HR and employment law training to understand what they should be doing and how they can do that. Like I said, wouldn't it be nice if it was compulsory? There you go, that's on my wish list. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I think we've got time for some questions. So if anybody's got any questions for anybody on our panel, we'll start with Sam.
Hello, thank you. A wealth of information. I just wanted to add that the Health and Safety Executive got 3 templates for stress. So I think from the top of my head, if you have more than 5 employees, you legally have to have paperwork in place to say that you've done assessments. But they're great because they've got information available on their website. So that's Health and Safety Exec.
Brilliant, thank you. Yes, Liz Pink.
Hi, thank you everybody for your chats and my Camille, the school mom. I am listening to all this. I think it's really great, really valuable and insightful. However, I'm hearing a lot about wellbeing in the workplace, focusing on it being a physical, actual workspace. I work in a company where 80% of us are remote. So how are you considering applying these lessons to people that are working at home? I also should add that I work in a particularly neurodiverse setting where there are certain struggles, I guess, with those that work at home with boundary setting, with switching off and walking away from their PC. I work for a games developer, so we have a lot of programmers, artists, coders, etc., who are so passionate about what they do outside of the workplace as well as in it, that one of the challenges that I face as the wellbeing manager for the company is encouraging them to actively switch off and do something mindful, but equally in reverse, actively asking people to engage in a virtual social, or I sort of have challenges on either side. So everything I'm hearing today is fantastic for physical workspace where 20% of our employees live. How would you take your strategies and put it into a remote setting so that everybody feels equal?
Yeah, thank you. Who wants to go for that one? Yeah, Charlotte.
So we have 3 employers in our trial who are fully remote. And you can absolutely implement reduced working hours for people who are working remotely. I think what the 4-day week and variants of it are about giving people some time that they can choose what they want to do with. And we do see for some of our business leaders that on that 5th day, they're often choosing to do a little bit of work. It's a passion project. It's a huge part of their identity. And we don't try to put any restrictions on what people do with that day. So if some of your colleagues wanted to work, then they could do so, but it's a choice. And I think autonomy has also been touched on a little bit as a theme by some of the other panelists too. But it sounds like you're doing lots of good things already by saying they've already got a fair amount of that autonomy, but don't forget, it's also good to go for a walk at lunchtime. Yeah.
Thank you.
Just also to add about this sort of the boundaries, but again, it's kind of like encouraging people and helping them understand a bit more, so have that self-awareness about when they've probably sort of gone over too many sort of working hours. As much as they enjoy it, it is still taking up a mental energy, which is a finite resource. So it is that sort of continuous drip feed reminder: take your breaks, step outside, get some fresh air. Think about sort of healthy lifestyle and be sort of quite holistic about it. But at the end of the day, we're kind of like adults. We're responsible for things. We can encourage them as much as you can, though, even working remotely. But also we can still have the conversations. It isn't quite as easy when it's via Zoom or via Teams, admittedly. But we still can sort of pick up on things and just normalise the conversation.
I was talking to this with a client the other day, and his observation was that the pendulum seems to have swung, that it's all about the responsibility of the organisations, and that employees need to understand that they need to step up as well. It can't all be laid at the doorstep of the senior management team, that they can model best practice and make policy and suggest, but actually we as employees also have to step up and know the parameters. And certainly with the flexible working pendulum, that's always swinging, and things are not static, and we need to keep adjusting so that employers are kept compliant, but employees also have to take responsibility for their actions. And I think, Dee, do you want to comment on that from a huge organisation that stepping up is important?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, I think I spoke about leadership and being authentic and giving that space, but absolutely. I mean, we have employee assistance programs, we signpost lots of information, and what we try to do is not put the responsibility, but encourage people to be more aware, educate them. Because not everybody understands the impact of sitting at a screen all day, not talking to anyone. Neurodiversity is really interesting because we celebrate on a monthly basis a number of different themes, whether it's prostate cancer, neurodiversity, LGBT, whatever it is, as part of our diversity, inclusion and belonging programme. And one of the things I've learned from that, and I think we're really benefiting from, is people opening up about certain things. Because as you say, we've got a lot of remote staff, we've got field service engineers, people who train the hospital to use the equipment, people who work from home, and reaching them is as important, if not more important probably, for us, because they're the hidden population. So yeah, it's very important.
And just, excuse me, and just to say, it is about employees doing, living their own lives, managing their own lives, but also as leaders, if you are seeing a pattern of your team working, if you're getting emails at 9 o'clock at night, actually to discuss it and pull it up and say, look at why it's happening and see whether or not something can be changed. Maybe that person is, not doing enough during the day and they're having to work late, but actually maybe there's a workload issue. But recognising that if there's a pattern of behaviour, to understand it and to talk about it and to, encourage that person to work within their, working time regulation, 48 hours. There goes the law, so.
Brilliant, thank you. Yes, Carleen.
One of the challenges for many people society today is loneliness, and that's been obviously magnified by lockdown and hybrid working. What clever strategies have you seen in the workplace to address that and to make sure that people don't feel isolated and lonely? And what I've seen is that, especially during lockdown, but that people didn't recognise that themselves, didn't put themselves out there. It's almost like they were sinking ships. It got worse before they recognised they needed to do something about that. But from a proactive perspective, what clever things have you seen businesses doing?
Who wants to take that on, please?
I don't know if it's clever, but I'm quite proud of it. We've got a lot of younger people joining Electa who, that started their career perhaps remotely and are finding it difficult to socialise. So we've started something, well, they started something because we gave them the platform to do them, called the Next Gen Group. And basically that's rolled out now into different little groups that either do sports and social. We've got volunteer days so they can go and do charity, fundraising. And we've encouraged or just provided the environment, whether they work remotely or whether they're new to Electa and coming in, to give that sense of inclusion and belonging. And I think that's really drawn dividends. Another thing that was implemented, something called Meet and Mingle, which is basically come in, meet people you haven't met before. There's soft drinks, maybe a glass of fizz, but fruit, obviously fruit. But just to get to know people, because I think part of overcoming loneliness is having the confidence to get out there and actually speak to people. And some people find that easier than others. So giving them that environment, and then they can take that away with them, and then they can either join up through Teams and or come back in again. And it's all part of our return to work and return to social, I suppose.
I'll also just address the previous question in both of these. We work with a lot of businesses and we put on lots of regular workshops, which can be done a lot of time remote now. So the power of Zoom. I don't personally love Zoom, but we do lots of workshops with people, with businesses that have employees all over the UK. And, we see it that kind of getting the topics that are hot for them. So what a 20-year-old is into and what a 60-year-old is into might be quite different, but actually discussing these things head on. So if you're concerned about loneliness, actually having that conversation in a workshop about loneliness is a conversation starter. And actually in business, yes, we should, we do need to take responsibility for our own actions, but actually thinking about those things, doing an insight study, looking at what affects your current employees, what challenges that they face, and doing it anonymous. Because I've worked with businesses that send out these studies and they've got their name at the end, and people still feel, actually, I can't give away that information because I'm going to, let my employee think that I'm not good enough because I have these worries. So actually asking the questions to your staff, like, what is important for you? What is worrying you? What is challenging you at the moment? And then creating workshops and sessions around that and just hitting them head on. And so I firmly believe in, finding out first what are the challenges faced, and then delivering workshops and sessions and leading it, and, doing something every quarter, or we work with a client at the moment, it's every other week we have a different theme. And we initially, when we started in October, there wasn't that many people in attendance because they just were nervous about joining. I don't want to, show that this is important to me. And now they're so well attended, and they've got their staff from all over the UK attending these sessions, and they're only short. They're 30-40 minute sessions every other week, and the response has been amazing.
Brilliant, thank you. I want to thank all of our panellists for that. It's really, really fascinating, really interesting. We're going to also type up notes. Oh, yeah, time.